Hi, this is Vicki Hoth and with Marie Eldridge and Angela Walters. Angela, are you there?
I am.
Hello, welcome. We are so
I'm so
excited to have you
excited.
here today.
I'm so thrilled to be here.
Actually, where are you, Angela?
I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, God's country. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, when we are here in Utah at the Handy Quilter Studios. So, Angela, you are really passionate about this subject today, and so we're just going to go ahead and turn it over to you. And if we see some questions, then we're going to break in and let you know every once in a while, but we're going to just let you have at it, all right?
Awesome. I'll try not to get too preachy. You know how that goes.
Now you're great.
Well, I think you already said it, but you're going to be recording this, so that's going to be nice. If anybody wants to revisit this information or if they have any questions, I'm excited to kind of go over that. I want to take just a moment and introduce myself to the people that might not know who I am and why the heck they should be listening to me. My name is Angela Walters, and this is a very nice representation of myself. The picture is very pretty, but I don't normally look this way. Normally it's a ponytail and stretchy pants, so I figured I would have a nice picture for this. But I've been machine quilting for 10 years and doing it as a business for 9, and I really, really love it. And over those last 10 years, I've added a lot of titles behind my name. I'm so proud that I can say, I'm an author, a fabric designer, speaker, blogger, and coffee addict. Well, I've probably been that my whole life. But I've added all those things behind my name, but there's always more to the story. Even though I've been doing this 10 years, it's not always been as successful as it is now. In fact, I would say most of the accomplishments I've had have come within the last few years, and I feel like I'm still trying to figure it all out. So, I'm excited to be able to say I'm a Handy Quilter ambassador and have such a great relationship with you all there, but, it didn't always start out that way. I don't think anybody plans on being a machine quilter or a professional machine quilter for that matter. When I was younger, I figured I might be a housekeeper, but realized that quickly was going to be out of the options. It wasn't until I met my husband's grandpa 10 years ago that he taught me how to quilt, and he is the one that showed me how to make quilts and showed me how to hand quilt them. And in fact, that's kind of what he would do. He would come to my studio and sit there and watch and kind of give me a hard time as I would quilt the stuff. And he's the one that actually encouraged me to get into machine quilting, and that's kind of where I ended up getting into it. Now this picture just shows a quilt, but it's also a great way to show my 2 kids when they were younger. That was kind of my life at the time, young kids trying to figure out the business side of it. And so, I was having fun with it. When I realized how much I loved the machine quilting part, I never did it with the intent of going into business for myself. I just really loved the quilting part and didn't like the piecing quite so much. So I have the kind of personality where I'll just jump in and figure it out. So on a whim, I told my husband, I've been thinking I should start a business. Now, he knows me well enough that every time I say I've been thinking, that usually means it's not good. But I just jumped into it and started quilting for others. And when I look back over those years, I think about all the mistakes I made starting out. In fact, I think if you followed my story, you could maybe call it the how not to start a machine quilting business, or otherwise call it don't do what I did. The learning curve for me was a little steep, but I figured once I got it all figured out, it really started going well. It was that realization that led to a new passion for me. I love machine quilting, and I will always love machine quilting, but I love the business side of it as well. I think back to those mistakes that I made and how long it took me to figure everything out, and so that led me to start a new website, The Business of Machine Quilting. And it's mostly just a blog for people that are interested in starting a machine quilting business or wanting to grow it. And I'm not saying that I have the answers to everything. In fact, I only say I'm the expert of my opinion, nothing else. But I think this is a new resource and something, like I said, I'm excited about. Like I said, I made a lot of mistakes, and so in this webinar, I'm going to go over the 3 biggest ones that I made. In the interest of time and maybe even my self-esteem, I'm not going to go into every little mistake I made, but just kind of touch on the ones that really changed. Once I addressed those mistakes and changed it, how I really found my groove in the whole business side of things. So the 3 things that we're going to talk about are the mistakes that I've made is, first of all, not having an operations plan. And I'm going to go into these in a little bit more detail. Secondly, I failed to market myself online and locally, and that sounds a little bit bigger than it was, but basically I wasn't taking advantage of the online resources that were out there. And so we're going to talk about how quilters can do that now and make their business even better. And lastly, working in my business and not on my business was a big mistake that I made. Not focusing from the outside trying to grow it, mostly just getting caught up in the small details. So that is what we're going to talk about. And these three mistakes were the game changers, or the ones that really got me hung up. One question I'm asked a lot is, when do you know if you're ready to take customer quilts? Now, this is not really part of the mistakes that I'm going to talk about, but it's just kind of an aside, kind of a question I know that some people will have. And it's different for everybody. I can't say that anybody is definitely ready. That's something that they would know themselves. But usually I would ask a few questions. Have you mastered a few free motion quilting designs that you feel comfortable with? Nothing fancy, just basic designs that you feel that you can recreate over and over again. Do you feel comfortable loading quilts and working with your machines? And are you mentally prepared to take customer quilts? It's a little stressful doing that. And in fact, I still get stressed out when I take customer quilts sometimes, because you're taking on a big responsibility, somebody's art and their work, and trying to improve on it. But I would say if you can say yes to those questions, then I would tell you to go for it. Usually this is my kind of philosophy for it. You don't have to offer everything when you're starting out. You can pick your 3 or 4 designs and start with those. And in fact, that's what I did. And you can add to it as you go. So the benefit there is that you can get started a lot quicker. You don't need to know everything, just something, a few things that you can do well. In fact, here are a few snapshots from my first portfolio. I offered a few pantograph designs, especially this lovely heart design. I know it's just beautiful. And then some swirls, and that's pretty much what I started with. I felt that I could do those consistently, and I just stuck with it. And then I added as I went. I started working and kept practicing, and I could start adding more custom designs, and even like feathers and trapunto, which trapunto, I always say I'll try everything once, and that's probably the last time I'll try that. It worked out okay though. The thing though is, if you're starting out and you only have a few designs that you're going to offer, you have to be able to say no. And this is the one thing that I am really I have a hard time with that. You need to be able to say, I can't do the design that you're asking for, because there would be some people that ask for it. So at this stage, especially when you're beginning out, you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So if something is out of your range, then tell them. But one suggestion that I make is to team up with another machine quilter that offers different services. So for instance, I was only doing swirls. If somebody had called and asked for feathers, I could have referred them to another machine quilter that did beautiful custom work. If you're going to do this, I'd encourage you to actually go introduce yourself to that person and let them know that you'll be sending referrals their way. It might help them to send some ones back to you as well. So that makes it a little bit easier to say no when you're able to give the customer, an idea of where they can go to get that. And just a random picture of quilting. I'm going to be talking about a lot of stuff, and it's going to be kind of dry. So I thought I'd throw some pictures of quilting in here every now and again to give the brain a chance to, have a little bit of relaxation there. Do you have any questions, Vicki? Am I still making sense to you, or have I already lost you?
Sorry, Kenton was typing an answer to a lady. No,
Oh, no.
Just keep on going. I love this quilt, and whatever is dry, I agree. You're going to just make up for it in beautiful pictures.
Awesome. Well, now that we've got the beginning stuff out of the way and talked about whether or not you're ready, let's just talk about the 3 biggest mistakes that I made and how you can avoid those and have your business be more successful as well. And I'd say first, my biggest mistake was not having an operations plan. This is a big one, and I know it's probably the least realized thing. I know a lot of quilters think, well, I need to have a business plan. I need to know what I can spend and what money I need to make. But an operations plan is just as important. And the main idea is that it's never too early to start. In fact, you should do it before things get out of hand. Somebody would say, well, I don't have any customers. What's the point? And I would say, perfect. Do it then. Don't wait till you're 5 years down the road and realize that everything is out of control. Like I did. And in case you're wondering, this is not good. This is how unorganized and how I was without a plan. So this mess was something that somebody had to help me figure out. But I'm just saying, if I had started sooner figuring out exactly how I was going to do things, I would have been in a much better position for running my business. In fact, I'm still trying to recover from that, from being so far behind. Okay, so a plan is important, but what is it? It's a detailed plan, but simple. I mean, I'm talking notebook and a pencil. We don't need a fancy program. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to have a list of how you're going to handle things. So make it detailed from the start of the process to the end. And we'll talk about things that you need to think about, but stuff like, how are you going to take quilts? How are you going to take payments? And that kind of thing. And like I said, it does not need to be complex. Simple is better. And remember, it's flexible. You can always change it. In fact, you should probably change it. As you grow as a business owner and as things change for you and you get busier, you're going to have to change the way you handle things. So even though you're writing it down now, you don't have to stick with it. You can always change it as you go. And what makes it so great is it acts as a guide when you get stuck in sticky situations. Some of the things that you need to think about before you even start is how are you going to handle an unhappy customer? Now, I'm sure most of you are not like me, and you'll never have an unhappy customer. But when you get in that situation, trying to figure out how you're going to handle it then, instead of, before you've even started, when you're kind of clear-headed and not so emotionally involved in the situation, will definitely help you get through that. So knowing how you're going to handle it, but also knowing that it can be flexible. So if somebody says, hey, I would like to bring a quilt to you, you can already say, that's great. These are the days that I'm open. This is what I'm going to do. So this is the one thing I wish I had done a lot sooner. And if I could just keep harping on the subject, if you're not convinced, the Small Business Association says that 50% of small businesses don't survive 5 years. And that's not really surprising. I think we've all heard that statistic a lot. But 90% of franchises do succeed over that same 5 years. And why is that? Well, it's because they have a plan. When you buy a franchise, you're buying into their operations plan. And so that is having a plan, a solid plan that you can follow will help you be successful. What should you consider when you're looking to put together your plan? Basically, just write down how you plan on handling every step of the process, from the quilt getting dropped off to how you're going to process the information, how you're going to store the quilts, and even the pricing and invoicing and payments. And I wish so badly that I had time to go into this, really in detail. But all I can say is that you just start with what you think will work for you, and then just kind of build off of that. Now, there's going to be some portions of this, especially if you're starting off, that you're not sure what to do. Well, ask around. You're not sure what kind of payments you should take? Maybe ask other machine quilters and see what they would do. You can also look online in forums. This community is so giving. There's always somebody willing to give you their advice and help you out with that. Another option is to look at other kinds of businesses. How do they handle it? Innovation is just taking an idea that works in another segment and applying it to your own business. So look at other businesses. How does your hairdresser schedule her appointments? How does the mechanic quote his work? So look at other businesses if you're not sure what to do with that. But the most important thing is that you go ahead and do it. And make an educated guess. You can always change it later. And sometimes I always say, just start small. Your customers will guide you for what they want you to do. A good example of this is payments. When I started taking customer quilts, I wasn't sure how I should take payments, so I just kept it simple. I took cash and check. And I had a couple customers say, oh, over the years, once PayPal became more popular, they said, oh, do you take PayPal? And I hadn't at the time, but enough people requested that was something that I could easily add. So you don't have to go complex. Start small. You can always add to it as you go. So just ask yourself what parts of the process you can work through in your business, what you can kind of decide how you're going to handle, and seek out help if you're having trouble trying to figure that stuff out. So once you have your plan, you have your business, it's running great, now you need to figure out how to pull in the customers. So my second mistake was not marketing myself online as well as locally. Now, when I started quilting, blogs and websites weren't quite as popular, and I wasn't even plugged into a local guild. My grandpa was the one who showed me how to quilt, so I just hung out with him, and he was my quilting buddy. But when I decided to start taking customer quilts, I knew that I probably needed to get connected, and I did that locally. I joined a local guild and began getting customers through word of mouth. Appealing to local quilters is a great way to get it up and running, especially when you're starting out. And I think I already kind of alluded to that. The best way to get a customer or to attract people to your business or your service is to let them get to know you and to see your work up close, actually touch your quilting, and kind of involve them that way. In fact, most of you are probably already connected with a group, so starting out might be just as easy as putting up your sign and saying, I'm taking quilts, and they'll start coming. So starting there is a good place to go. And there's so many local things you could do. You can go to quilt guilds, sewing groups, or even local quilt shops to advertise your services or engage other quilters. Now, I do want to take just a moment and talk about local quilt shops. Whatever you do, don't go in there and take your business card and just leave it. Go in there and buy something, talk to the owner, and then let them know that you are offering machine quilting services. They're in business too, so support local quilt shops and other small businesses as well. And really, the same goes for quilt guilds. If you're joining a quilt guild, give back to the guild as well. Participate. Be a member of it, not just using them as a way to advertise yourself. But again, that's just an aside. Now, local is great, and I think a best place to start for myself, that's where I started, but you should also be marketing your business online to expand your customer base. This is so important. This way you're not limited to the quilters in your area, and you're not limited to the going rates. I know that picking out prices is hard and trying to decide what you're going to charge, but if everybody around you is charging much less than you're willing to charge, then going online and trying to attract customers that way is a great way to go about it. Plus, it also makes it easier for your customers to refer you to their friends. You want to make it easy for them to tell everybody how great you are and what your services are like. So having a website and social media will really help with that. And some stuff, blogging, interacting on social media, and even online groups and forums. Now, I know there's a bunch of you out there saying, I don't have time for that. I'm too busy. But really, the truth of it is you have to make time for it. You have to try to grow your business everywhere that you can. And we'll talk about that a little bit next when we talk about working on your business and not just in your business. Now, I do have an additional resource if you're interested in blogging, you don't have a blog, or you have one you're wanting to grow. On thebusinessofmachinequilting.com, there's a free downloadable PDF with a handout that you can print out, and just gives you tips and tricks and ideas for what to blog about, what not to blog about, and kind of just general blogging etiquette. So be sure to check that out if you are interested. So marketing yourself, look at different ways that you can do that, interacting with other people as much as possible, and really trying to get the word about your business out there is great. And doing it both ways, locally and online, will help the other grow. So if you have the active social media, then your local customers can refer you, but also having more not local customers. And actually now, my business was all local quilts, and now I'm almost completely working, through the mail. So I have people send me quilts all the time and not ever had any problems. And can you still hear me, Vicki? I'm getting kind of a weird message. I want to make sure I haven't lost you.
Yes, you're doing a great job. We do have a couple of questions. One of them we'll address a little later. Sorry. Angela, we're getting some feedback from you, so when we ask your questions, can you mute your side? That's better. One of the questions is, can I get a copy of the slides to use as a reminder? And that, yes, we record all of this, and you can go after probably Monday. Everything will be online, that you can watch this again, and you can also print off all of the slides. So everything that Angela's talking about today is out there for you by Monday, and so that you don't have to be scrambling, writing everything down right now. So it's there for you forever. All right, Angela, I'm going to put I'm going on mute, and you go ahead and go for it again.
Great. Okay, so we've talked about, marketing yourself, how I failed to take advantage of both opportunities. And really, I would just want to end this part by saying, I started really kind of blogging and interacting online about 4 years ago, and that is when my business really took off and opportunities presented themselves. So of everything I've done to run my business and try to get it all figured out, that is the one thing that has been the biggest game changer for me. So hopefully that will encourage some quilters out there that are just thinking, you know, that's just too much work for me right now. So it will change a lot. Okay, so the last mistake I made, this one really came as a realization after I started changing the other mistakes. I was working in my business and not so much on my business. And I hope that I can cram a little bit more information into your all's heads right now, but this is a big one. I mean, when you own a machine quilting business, you're not just the quilter, you're the CEO. And you're not just the employee, you're the entrepreneur, and you kind of have to wear both hats. It's your job to bring in the customers and quilt it, and then also try to get more customers in. And I know some people are busier than they want to be, and they might think, I don't want to be any more busy than I am right now. But the truth of the matter is, the more customers you have, the more opportunities you have, the more selective that you can be with the quilts that you take, and the more that you can charge. So even if you feel like your business is doing well, continue to work on it and not just in it. And so let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. Well, I say there's like 3 main ways to improve your business, and that's by encouraging referrals, finding your niche, and then creating a great customer experience. And I'm just going to take a few moments on each of these points because I just feel like this is the area that really helped me. First, the referrals, the word of mouth. There's no advertising better than a happy customer that is telling their friends how great you are. So encouraging your existing customers to be your biggest advertisers is the best way to go about it. And I say the first thing to do is to ask for it. You would think that it would be assumed that you would appreciate them letting other people know how great you are, but sometimes people forget. So I usually suggest that maybe when you're dropping the quilt off, you say something, or when they're picking it up, sorry, you'd say something like, I hope you're so thrilled with my job that you want to tell all your friends about it. And they'll know that you're kind of wanting them to do that. I'll never forget when I was first starting out and trying so hard to get customers in, and I had a lady call me up, and she was so bummed because her friend had found out who did her quilting. And I said, well, what's wrong with that? Because that was me. And she said, I wanted to keep you a secret. I didn't want you to get too busy and you wouldn't be able to do my quilts. Well, of course, you can imagine I was shocked because I thought, no, I want you to tell all your friends. So be sure that you're just kind of putting an expectation out there. And I also put on my invoices, the best compliment is a referral. So by just letting them know that you would love it, that you'd like, and also you'd like to know if you can improve stuff too. Just letting them know that really is the biggest step, and it makes a big difference. Also, make it easy to encourage referrals. You know, don't have a complicated website or a hard way for them to get a hold of you. If you have business cards, maybe you give them a few cards, or you know, send them a link in an email if you've blogged about their quilt so that they could pass it on to their friends. And there's just ways to do it, but you want to make it as easy as possible so they can tell everybody. And I know that some people feel uncomfortable asking, you know, asking for the referral, but really it's not that big a deal. Just say, you know, and you could kind of phrase it in that kind of terms. I would just love for you to tell your friends about me. Now, I do want to say some people give discounts or, you know, invite 10 friends and get one free. That's completely fine. I think you need to do what works best for your business. But I just feel like the quality of the referral goes down. I think when people know that somebody's being compensated for their opinion, they don't trust it quite as much. So just play with that, see if it works for you. I always think it would be better to do like a random act of kindness after the fact. So if you have a customer that has referred a few friends, maybe you send her a little gift or offer her something after the fact. But again, that just has to come with what works for you. And I always say I'm only the expert of my opinion and my experience. So encouraging referrals is an easy way to grow your business. But also finding your niche. There are tons of machine quilters out there that do it professionally, which is great. I mean, the more that people's quilts are getting finished, the more quilts they'll make and the more they'll need done. So it's great for the industry to grow, but you need to find your niche and find what makes you you. I always say in my classes, there's a lot of machine quilters, but there's only one you. So find out what makes you so great and why they would want, you know, to use your services. To define a niche is, I just say it's a style of quilting that you enjoy doing, that is also in demand, and that is profitable. Those are the 3 kind of points that need to be, you know, taken taken into consideration. For example, if you don't like custom quilting, even though all your customers seem to request it and they all will pay for it, don't do it. You need to enjoy what you're doing. For me, I don't like to do all over quilting designs, so I don't really offer them. Even though that it's in demand and I could profit from them. It's actually probably one of the more profitable styles of quilting for your time versus money. For instance, but on the other hand, you may love quilting butterflies, but nobody wants butterflies. Well, then that can't really be a niche as well. So find something that fits all three of those. And it doesn't even have to be huge. I'm not even saying, you know, a niche can be you're the fastest quilter in your guild, or you do the best feathers in your guild. But you just find what that thing is that makes you special and kind of encourage it. So for example, I would say that my specialty or my niche is semi-custom quilting that uses regular free motion quilting designs in different ways. I'm not a show quilter. I don't do super custom type stuff. The designs that I work with are quick and fast and fun to quilt, and that's just kind of where I've evolved from. Now, if you get kind of stressed out about like, oh, I have to define my style, just remember, no niche is too small if you own it. If you're the best quilter on your street, start with that. Your niche can evolve and change as you go, so don't feel like you're always stuck into this mentality. At one time, I would say my niche would have been the feather girl. In my guild, I quilted feathers on everything. I'm sure that's not shocking to some of us who are hearing this, but it's not the same anymore. It's kind of evolved. So the more you quilt and the more you find out what you like to do and what your customers are asking for, the more you can find out what your niche is, and the more that you can embrace that. So, you know, when somebody would say, oh, I love feathers, I could say, oh, I quilt them on everything. I love to do them too. It's just a way to define myself. And I have just a couple examples of quilting. I know I've said a lot of words, so now we'll show some pictures. But the quilting that I do is nothing complex. It's just the same. I joke that one of these days people are going to figure out I'm just quilting swirls and I'll be out of a job. But until then, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And so this is just an example of a beautiful quilt designed by Julie Herman, and just a way to have fun with it. I used regular designs, but throwing in some different stuff. So the star in the middle is just quilted a little bit differently to add a different look. Again, it's nothing complex, just fun. And another quilt here, creating secondary patterns easily with the quilting to really kind of enhance that. So that's kind of the niche that I've fallen in. So as you're quilting, ask yourself what is your niche, what defines you, and play that up. Make sure you don't have to walk around saying, hi, I'm a machine quilter and I love feathers, but you know that that's kind of your brand or what you're playing up. And just knowing that you can change as well. It will evolve. And actually it should. And lastly, creating a great customer experience will really help you grow your business. It's a lot harder to attract new customers than to keep your current customers happy, and you can do that by providing the best experience possible. Now, I know we're all great machine quilters, so there's not even questioning the quilting. I'm sure it's great, but you can make it a great experience all around. We know that people talk, and so you want to make sure that they're talking about the wow experience that they've had. I also like to say, or I've read actually, I can't remember who said it, so I can't attribute the quote, but it's easier to do 100 things 1% better than one thing 100% better. And that's just saying if you take every part of the customer experience and try to make it better, then the overall thing will be great. So some things to consider: promise less and deliver more. I'm so guilty of it, and I'm guilty of it right now, promising a quilt by deadline and missing it. That doesn't make for a great customer experience. So try to not do what I'm doing. Also, communication. Things happen. We're all busy people, and our customers will understand. So I just always try to be really open with what's going on with their quilt, and even trying to say, which I've not been the greatest, all the time, but your quilt arrived safely. I'm working on it now. Just kind of keeping them in on the process of that. But also in the presentation. And for those who don't know me, I am such a business book nerd. I love to read business books, and I just got done reading the biography of Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, which, I mean, all personal preferences aside, he was a little crazy, but he was obsessed with presentation, and I thought, wow, what a great point, what a great thing I can apply to my business. As I was boxing up quilts to send back, I was using used boxes that I just had, and I was cramming the quilt in a trash bag and then taping it up and sending it off. And after reading that book, I realized that you do want it to be more of a presentation or more of a experience to open the quilt. And so I took the time and invested in some labels with my logo and my name, a nice cellophane bag that I can wrap the quilt in, and even a postcard that I could stick in there saying, you know, where the quilt can be returned to should it get lost. And then a new box, which is an expense, but it's worth it when they get a nicely packed quilt and it looks nice and it's an experience to open it. So that's just one example of what I did. You don't have to do exactly the same as that. I mean, there's so many different parts of the process that you can change. So just start looking as you're working through your quilts and seeing what can I improve 1%, or what part of this customer experience could really work on. So that you can find that there's a lot of ways to do just that. But if there's only one point that you remember from this whole lecture, just remember this. I truly believe that anybody could be successful if they work hard and are nice to everyone. And that means everyone. This is a well-connected industry. Quilters are friends with a lot of people. Go out of your way to be nice and to work really hard. And I just think there's no way that you cannot be successful. It's just a given. And so if you need more resources, I know I want to answer some questions as well, so I'm just going to gloss over this, but please visit thebusinessofmachinequilting.com or my personal website, which is quiltingismytherapy.com, where on that I share more quilting stuff, less business-y stuff. So any questions, Vicki? I'd love to answer some.
Yes, we do have some questions. First off, will you mute, please, for a minute? Okay. The first question is, how long did it take you to get started in this business when you felt comfortable?
Oh, that's a good question. I started taking customer quilts about a year after I got my machine. As far as feeling comfortable, I don't know if I'm still very comfortable. No, I'm just kidding. I'm still practicing and trying new things. But it was probably about a year before I started, and I would say a good 3 years before I felt like, okay, maybe this was going to be okay. I wasn't ruining everything too bad. So that's more of a joke than anything. But it's different for everybody. I tend to have a jump in it and figure it out kind of personality, but I know other people have started a lot quicker and been even more successful. So it just really depends on the person. Good question.
All right, another question. How do you handle a difficult client?
Well, first I cry and cry. No, I'm just kidding. Difficult client. It depends on the situation. I have had a customer or two that has not been happy with my job. One was a tension issue, and one was I picked a completely different color thread than they requested. I go out of my way to make it right, and I know that sometimes it's hard because you're busy or you're thinking how much money you're losing off of it, but I really want to make it, you know, if they tell their friends I messed with their quilt, at least they can finish up by saying, but she fixed it and I'm happy now. If a client, like a difficult client, I don't know if you're meaning maybe also on the front end, like they're more demanding, more, you know, high maintenance. I call them high maintenance clients. You know, I think it's just important to remember that a customer is a customer, and sometimes we get friendly with our customers or maybe not so friendly, but it's important to remember that they are the customer. So I try, you know, to really kind of be very proactive with those kind of people and, you know, very soothing and I don't know, professional, I guess I would say. And I found in the most cases, after a few quilts, they kind of relax. It's a new thing to trust somebody with your quilts. But I wouldn't be above dropping a client. I don't want to say it like that, not like dropping a client, but, you know, you don't have to put yourself in an unhealthy situation. You don't want to be stressed out more than you already are. So it may come to the point where you just say, you know, I'm just getting kind of busy, can't really work on your quilts anymore. I fortunately have not really had to do that, but, you know, if it got to the point, I probably would. That's a tricky one.
Okay, another question that's come up quite a bit here is how do you determine your pricing? How do you decide?
Oh, I knew this one would come up. That's the big one. How do you decide the pricing? It is so hard because we're putting a value on our time. And our time is the resource that we have the least of, but that we use the worst. And so I'm going to talk generally because it's generally different for everybody. But I'm going to say that it's a process of figuring out how fast you can quilt a quilt, how much time you can devote, and really what the going rates are in your area. Not that you're stuck to that. I will say to not do it the way that I did it. I started out my prices way too low because I was so desperate to get a customer that I thought, oh, if I could just get them in. Well, here's the deal with starting too low. First of all, you're undercutting the local people, which is, I mean, it's a business, so there's not necessarily anything terribly wrong with that, but it's just not smart business. But also, there's a perceived value to your quilting, and by starting off low, it makes the value seem like your quilting is not as good. Nothing screams new quilter like a lower price. And also, it is very, very hard to raise your prices. It's so hard. So starting out low and then trying to raise them as you go, it's a lot harder than it is. I wish I had started out at a going rate that was in line with everybody else in my area, and I wish that I had, you know, saw that I might not get as many quilts, but I would make the same amount of money by quilting less. And in fact, I would say that really just within the last couple of years, I've gotten that into my head, which kills my husband because he's a business owner himself, and he's been telling me that for years. But just playing it that way. Now, if you're starting out, I know that's a question that some people will have. Well, I'm starting out. How do I get customers if I have the same, you know, rate? Well, you can offer sales, and I wouldn't even say like first-time customers half price. Make it like a flash sale. This time in February, you know, bring me 2 quilts, get one of them half off, something like that. It's very clear who gets it. It's very clear on how long the deal is, and very clear that it's just temporary. And I think that's the best way to go about it. That's a tricky one. I wish I had a better, clear answer for that. But just knowing that it's harder to raise your prices than it is to offer a sale on, you know, prices that are the same rate. Good question.
Okay, another question that there's a lot of quilts, there's a lot of quality of quilters, of piecers, and you've probably seen it all. How do you handle quilts that come in that the piecing is bad or the borders are too flappy? You know, how do you handle issues like that? Do you send it back to the quilter and say, fix it? Do you tell us what you do?
That's a good one. I have seen it all. And do you know who the worst piecer is that I quilt for? That would be myself. So I just think back when Grandpa taught me how to make quilt tops, he told me that we didn't have to iron the seams, which now I just think is hilarious because, you know, if I had been sending my stuff off to Long Arm Quilter, they would have dropped me a long time ago. My personal experience with this is how I handle it. It's different for everyone. So this is what I do. Just take it for what it's worth. How's that for a political answer? Anyway, when I get a quilt, I will quilt it. I don't mind if the borders are wavy. I'll make it work. So, you know, sometimes it won't come out. You know, sometimes you have to do the tuck, you know, where you fold the fabric over and quilt it. What I do to protect myself is I get it loaded on the machine and I take a picture of it so that you can see the fullness, maybe a couple of pictures. And then I quilt it. I don't say anything to the customer unless they ask. Now, I know that some people would say, your name is on it, it's not going to look great. But here's the deal. I'm assuming people know that it's not perfect. They know that the points aren't matching up, and it's not my job to beat them, you know, beat them over the head and make them feel worse about it. I want it to be, like I said, a great experience. Now, there are customers that say, well, tell me, how did it go? And I could say, well, it was a little full. If you know, the borders had a little bit of fullness. If you wanted some tips, I can, you know, give you some information on how to do that, or refer them to a place on my website that would, you know, tell them how to properly take, you know, the borders on and stuff. Because I know that some customers do want to know. But I kind of have the mindset that it's fine. It's not going to be perfect. But there again, I'm not into perfection, so I always say there's no such thing as perfection in free motion quilting. So I don't really expect it out of my customers. And I know that makes some quilts harder to work on, but you know, it is what it is. Some quilts are going to be like that, and that's just the thing of business. But that's just how I handle it, and people can do it definitely however they feel comfortable.
Okay, are you ready for more questions?
Yes, this is my favorite part. I could do a whole webinar.
Okay, so when a quilt comes, you have excess well, I'm going to kind of put a few things in here and let you just talk for a while. How much extra backing fabric do you tell them to add? Do you provide the batting for them? And when you're finished with the quilt, do you cut the outside edges off, or do you send it back to them as is? And the last question is, what happens if you snip a quilt tear a quilt or something happens on your side, how do you address those? Can you remember all those questions, Angela?
I think I can. I'll probably answer some questions in there that weren't even asked. How about that? For the quilts, I asked for at least 4 extra inches all the way around for the backing, knowing that sometimes that doesn't happen, but usually that's a good amount to have. And and I will say something like that to a customer. So if they send me one and it didn't have quite enough, but I manage it, I might just say, hey, next time I love a little extra room, give them a little wiggle room and kind of joke with them that way. I do supply batting. I keep one kind of batting on hand, the kind that I like to use, which is Quilter's Dream Poly. I'm sure somebody would ask that. I keep it on hand because that's what I like to use. If a customer would like to buy it from me, great. If they want to supply their own, I'm fine with that as well. They can supply whatever kind of batting they'd like. I know some people don't like to use other people's, their customers' batting, but I'm fine with it. I just make a note on their information saying that I need to use theirs. I will say that one thing I don't use is customer's thread. I did that a couple times. It's such a pain. So I just stick with the thread that I use. And now more than in the beginning, I don't really have anybody ask for it. So I would just say if somebody brings it up, just say, oh, this is what works best in my machine, and I'm sure you want it to look really good. So here, you can pick out which color you'd like or something like that. And oh, what do you do if you snip a quilt? Man. That is tricky. Well, first of all, you always tell them that happened. You do not want them to find out later when they're looking at it and feel like you were trying to hide that from them. So I've done it a few times, embarrassingly enough, and here's what I did. I fixed it by sticking a little bit of like fabric glue or something on it, maybe a piece of fabric underneath it, something. I fixed the hole. And then I told them when they picked it up, I said, oh, I had a little problem, whatever the reason was. Sometimes a needle will break and it will puncture a little hole in there. I had a little problem. I said, if I got it fixed up, I bet you won't even be able to find where it's at. And then just leave it at that. They're not usually going to ask you where it's at, and you don't have to go about pointing it out. Now, if it's a big thing and it's obviously obvious, then you probably want to discuss that with them. And I don't know how fixing that looks like, if it means, taking out the quilting and repiecing that part or what. Knock on wood, I've not had to ever do that, but I could see how that could easily happen. And so, but I think that's where the communication and just saying, I'm going to get this fixed, it's going to be right, and we're all going to be happy, and then you're going to, have a great quilt that you love. So figuring out that way. But I would say the main takeaway for that is to not point out your mistakes. And really, this is not a question that was asked either, but while I'm on my soapbox, I'll just go with it. When you give the customer their quilt, say something like, I had so much fun quilting this. I am so happy with how it turned out. I hope you love it as much as I do. Make sure you project that confidence, and they'll be excited too. If you hand the quilt to them and you're like, I hope you like it, well, it's just not showing that you're sure that they will. You want them to feel like you did a great job and you know that it's a great job. And so when they say, oh, I love this or whatever you've done, don't point out the mistakes. Just say it was fun, I had a blast doing it, and just move on. Just say thank you. I always say the best way to take a compliment is just to say thank you and then move on. But so that's kind of how I'd handle those situations.
Oh, had a hard time finding that unmute button, Angela. More questions here. What kind of thread do you use? Do you match your top thread with your the backing fabric, or how do you match your threads? Do you do a thread charge, or do you just include that in your business? And as far as if you get a backing that is not squared up, do you square it up? Obviously, probably, but I'll let you make that decision there. And then do you charge for that? Are there any other charges that you would add along the way as you're quilting a quilt? Go for it, Angela.
Good questions. Okay, so I actually wrote these down so I remember. Thread. When I got my machine, tension is the thing that we all struggle with a little bit. I found a thread that worked, and I just stuck with it, and that's Superior So Fine thread. I use that on almost all of my customer quilts. It's easy because it blends nicely. It is a poly thread, but I love how it looks, and it's low lint. And there's a ton of colors, so I don't have to worry about tension. I'm using the same kind of thread, just in different colors. If somebody requests cotton, then I definitely have that available as well. So that's the main reason why I use the thread because it's great, but I just stick with it. I am all about quilting efficiently. I joke that I got my machine when my son was 6 months old, so I've always had to quilt during nap time or with a kid hanging on my leg. So quick, and I don't have to deal with tension. I can just switch out the colors. My theory, again, my philosophy, my opinion is I think great quilting enhances a quilt top. It's kind of like makeup, you know, it highlights without being overly obvious. So I use thread color that blends in all my quilts. I want people to see the quilt pattern first, but then like a second later see the quilting and come up and look at it. So I do match the thread to the top of the quilt. I match the bobbin thread to the top thread. I just think, you know, not that tension is a problem, but there's always those areas where maybe you can see a little bit of the top through the bottom, and I just rather not deal with that. And that's probably because one of the unhappy customers I had way back in the beginning, she had a hot pink top and a white back, and she wanted matching thread on front and back. And I knew better. I knew that it wouldn't work, but I thought, oh, I'll make it work. I'll make it work. And it didn't, and she did not like it. And, you know, it was a traumatic experience. She was upset. I felt horrible, and I had to fix it, which was traumatic in itself. So I've never really done that since. And, I mean, sometimes if it's close, you know, I'll try to use a different color, but I don't mind if the quilting shows up on the back. And if you have a customer that says something about that, you can always just say, well, if you were going to hand quilt it, what color thread would you use? And that usually kind of gives them the, oh, okay, well, I guess that's true. So that's how I handle it. Now, when it comes to charging, I always feel like when I start talking about the charging stuff that I'm going to get hate emails. But here's the deal. I don't like extra charges. I just try to put it all in my price. So like a thread charge, anything like that. I can't remember any other charge, loading fee or switching out the designs. I have found my niche, and my niche is the one kind of quilting I like to offer, the semi-custom, and that's all I offer. So I don't charge for thread. I don't charge for anything. I have my set price, and then that's it. And I just feel like it's better that way. I think about airlines, or look at other companies. What are they doing? You know, Southwest, I like to fly Southwest. There's not those little charges that they add on. You know, nothing's worse than going to a restaurant, and they're like, oh, you want sauce? It's going to be $0.25. So I like to lump it all in the price. I just think it looks better, and it's also easier to understand for the customer. And then you don't get the person that wants to bring their own thread since you're charging them for yours. So that's just my personal thing. There's no extra charges in my price except for shipping. They pay for shipping both ways. So there's that, and then I do have a minimum charge. So if I'm quilting something small, but I don't really list that anywhere. I just say, hey, this is going to be this much, because you know, I don't even really tell them why. I just tell them that's going to be the price. Okay, so here's the thing. When I learned how to quilt, talking about the backing, what do you do if it's not square? I wish you all could have been in that room with me when they delivered the machine. I didn't really stress this in the beginning, but when I got my long arm, I'd never even seen one. I didn't even know how it worked. Grandpa had seen one at a show one time, and he suggested I should buy it. So that was the extent of our knowledge. So when I got the machine, the guy delivered it, I didn't even realize that you had to actually move the machine. I'm serious. I really thought it did the quilting for you, which is hilarious now. But at the time, I didn't know. And my husband had already, you know, given me that speech, you know, you better not stop using this, and if we're going to pay this for it, you better use it. So I had to figure it out. Well, my grandpa loved to buy ugly quilt tops. He never saw a quilt top that he thought was ugly. He bought everything. And so those are the quilts that I practiced on. I'm getting to my point. It's just a long way there. So I just learned how to load quilts myself, and I dealt with backs that weren't square. And all I did was just pin it so that it was square. So when I pin the back on the front and I'm rolling it, and I drape it over the back roller, if it's not completely straight, I just pin it on there like it was. So the backing might hang over the leader on one area more than the other, and then I roll, you know, then I start just normal. And so I never, and it's funny because when I started joining more forums and more groups that talked about squaring up the back, I thought, I'm not doing that. Uh-oh. So I don't square up the back, and it's worked fine for me. I've not had any troubles. So I don't know what to say about that, but I think if you are doing it, you should charge for it. If you're doing any kind of work on their quilts, there should be a charge. And even just, you know, more of like a, not a penalty, but just to discourage them, because you don't want to spend your time straightening up quilt backs. Your money is going to be in the actual quilting. So that's how I would handle that situation.
Okay, more questions. We've got just a few more minutes, and we'll see if we can get as many questions done. If your question is not answered, we have all of the questions here. We will send them to Angela, and Angela will email you personally, won't you, Angela? And answer these questions. Superior thread, you talked about that you use the SoFine. Is it a 30 weight or a 40 weight or a 50 weight, sorry. Do you use the Superior in the bobbin as well? And the one thing that you didn't address before that we ask is, do you cut the excess off before you send it back to the customer? And batting, what type of batting or what brand? And do you ever use 2 layers of batting? And if you do, what do you do? What do you do? Wool, poly, cotton, whatever? And then the last question a couple of last questions, I guess, and then we'll finish up is, I don't know if you want to do this, but I'm just going to ask you this, and you can tell me no or yes. What do you personally charge for a custom quilt and an edge-to-edge? And then the last question is, how do you handle this with your family as far as your business? And then actually the final question that I want to ask is, tell us about what machine you use today.
All right, I think I've got those all listed, and if I miss one, you can tell me. So I use the 50 weight Superior SoFine. Again, that's just the one that's worked, so I just stuck with it, and I use that in the top end bobbin. I will use their Omni thread from time to time, just if I need something that's a little thicker, because I want the quilting to show up just a little bit more. So that's just kind of what I do. But I like answering that question because I know people want to know, but don't get too hung up on the small things that I do. Find what works for you and just go with that. So, I mean, that's a great place to start. But if it's not working in your machine, shoot, drop it and find something that does. And that's how you be more productive, because to me it's all about being productive. And like I said, I started with kids, and so I've always been, limited in my time. So that kind of plays into the next question: do I cut off the excess batting and backing? I don't. First of all, unless a customer requests it, which is very rarely, I never would actually cut it right up to the edge without their request, because if they do a different kind of binding, that could really be bad. And I know that kind of plays into presentation, because if it's nicely trimmed a couple inches away from the outside, it'll look, nice. But usually there's not too much extra, and so I just fold it up and include it. And I also kind of think of it almost like a little bit
Angela, we've lost you. Are you there? I guess we've lost Angela, so we're going to go ahead and finish this presentation. It's been wonderful having her. All of these slides this presentation is recorded. Monday, you'll be able to find this on handyquilter.com in our education under webinars. And I know there's a lot of questions coming in, so we will be able to send those to her, and she should answer your questions personally. And so we are excited to have her. She is an awesome quilter. She quilts on an Avante machine and does all freehand quilting. And she is in a lot of classrooms around the country and at shows. She'll be at Houston, so that you'll be able to take classes from her if you ever go there. And she will be coming to Salt Lake next month, May, for our Quilters Academy. She'll be one of our teachers, so you'll be able to see her there. And come and sign up for that. And she's just darling. I just love being
so much
them.
Information. She's a pro. She's very professional,
young.
And she's likable.
And she's just likable. Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you are. You're back.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. My internet just dropped me all of a sudden. I am so sorry that happened. All of a sudden I'm talking and I don't see the little mic. So I don't know where I actually cut off at. So if you still, or were you wrapping up?
We are wrapping up, but you go ahead and
So can you hear me?
Yes. Say yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. I'm so sorry about that. I'll just wrap up the last few questions that people asked, just jumping into there. I just want to say, for what I charge honestly, I have different rates for different people depending on the situation. So it's very different. I don't do edge-to-edge or full custom, so I just have the one rate and for that style of quilting, and I just found that that works best for me. When I started, I would have, you know, the all over and then the semi-custom and the custom, but I would find that I still felt nervous charging the regular price. So my husband said one time, why don't you just have the one rate and just charge that? So that's kind of how I went with that. But that kind of happened after doing it a while, finding what worked for me. But the question that I really liked, the last two, you know, talking about family balance, it's really hard, you know, to work from home. It's great. I mean, I feel like I have the American dream. I get to make a living doing what I love, and that is amazing. But there has to be a clear, you know, work-life balance, and I haven't found it yet. I'm very obsessed and very focused on the quilting stuff, so I always say, you know, I don't do anything else besides, you know, take care of my family and quilt. But I think also the illusion or balance is just an illusion. I think it's just doing what you can do that day, doing the best you can, and just knowing, you know, that you're really kind of doing what you can. So I hate for people to think, oh, you know, she's got 3 kids and she's doing all this and she must be so successful or whatever. That's not the case. I mean, my house is filthy. You know, I need to take a shower. So it's life. That's life. And so just knowing that finding from day to day what works, it's going to be different in every situation. And but I do love getting to do what I do, and I especially love, you know, getting to do stuff like this and connect with people, because I feel like I'm an extrovert that comes to my quilting room every day and is kind of by myself. So, and I'm so glad you guys had me out here. I know that a question that got asked was what kind of machine do I use, and I do use a Handy Quilter Avante. It's the 18-inch model, and I love it. And I have had people ask, why don't you get a bigger machine? Well, I just think it's perfect for what I do. A lot of smaller quilting, it works great, and so I'm really enjoying that, as well as getting to do stuff like this with you guys.
Thank you, Angela.
Well, I'm not sure if you can hear me or not. It sounded like you cut out, but I just want to say thank you again for having me. And I just know that, you know, if anybody wants to be successful in the machine quilting business, they can. I know it's kind of trite, but if I can do it, anybody can do it. So thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you, everyone, for joining our webinar today. And we will join you for another webinar.